This is episode 4, right? And in this episode, I'm going to introduce you guys to inspector that worked with me for 2 years, give or take. And we did a boatload of inspections. Forrest was with me at a time when the real estate market was hot. We were doing 12 and 13 inspections a week and re-inspections and stuff in between. So when I tell you that Forrest got his introduction to home inspection at probably the busiest time, right? Because I don't know that we've seen a time that busy since. That is really and truthfully like how he got into it. Want to take a minute just to kind of introduce everybody. So, Forrest Simpson, he's with FCS Home Inspection. And Forrest, take a second and kind of tell us about your business, tell us about your service area and kind of services you offers, things like that.
Hey everybody, Forrest Simpson. Thanks for having me, Brad, Michael. So as Brad said, I'm the owner of FCS Home Inspection. Like Brad, I'm a single inspector company. My service areas, I'm licensed in Florida and Alabama. So I do a little bit in Pensacola area, Escambia County. Most of my work is in Baldwin County, Alabama, and Mobile. Here, I'm also a fortified home evaluator and a Strength in Alabama homes roof grant evaluator. So I do that as well. In Alabama, I'm sure you guys have talked about before. You to get your license, you have to do a ride along program, and that's how I met Brad. When it was time for me to get my ride alongs for Alabama, I'm calling inspectors, and he was one of the very few that was gracious enough to say, "Sure, man, come on." And I got on my first ride along with me, and we kind of were joined at the hip for quite a while after that. Um, and it was honestly, it was one of the best things that could have happened to me at that point. I'm sure, Michael, you've experienced, the benefits of working with Brad so far. And I think looking back for me, it was the exposure to everything. Like just said, it was one of the busiest times in the market. So here I am, brand new inspector, and I'm seeing 2 full inspections a day, sometimes 3. There was sometimes where we would squeeze a third one in, and I'm seeing, the work that a 5 and 10-year inspector would see. So, it was definitely a crucible, a baptism of fire. You either get good fast or you you decide you're gonna do something else.
Well, I know one thing that kind of struck me with you early on, right, was your desire to do the best job that you could do. And I know you had brought up a minute ago about, being humbled kind of right out of the gate, but it wasn't for, lack of talent or lack of, desire, I guess, if you want to make it sound weird. But, it's one thing to know. I know I went through this when I got started. I knew what I wanted to do and I knew how I wanted to do it, but I just didn't have the repetitions to know like how I wanted to execute those things. How could I put those together? And whenever you started riding along with me, I mean, we kind of hit it off like that. And that was one thing, I mean, to your credit, is being able to kind of jump into that and then not really get overwhelmed and not really, need a breather. Like you were just ready to go, right? I told Michael this. I said, Forrest is very task oriented, right? If there's a list of things, Forrest wants to start at the top and just get through them. And, even when you might not have been sure what to do next, like there was no lack of ambition there. And I knew when you started doing those with me that, I didn't know how long it would take or whatever, but I knew you were going to be successful at it. And by the time, because if you worked with me 2 years, I would say, was it like 6 months in or so, you started doing them for me, on your own? I know that somewhere around in there, 1 or 2 a week. And, it just kind of takes off from there. And then, for Michael is, essentially the new Forrest to a degree because Michael's background, being a builder, knowing I'm not going to say everything about houses because none of us truly know everything, but knowing a lot, right? So in Michael's situation, he's knows what he's looking for, knows how to look for it, but it's the presentation. And, if you go back and think about, when you started working with me, that's what I told you the difference was between, you know, because you'd brought up on that after that first day. I said, well, I'll send you the report and then you can look at that and, kind of compare. And, when you came back to work the next day, you were like, yeah, I got a lot to learn. But it wasn't on the inspection side so much as it was the presentation side because the software and stuff that we use, I mean, I know we all use Spectora, the three of us, not all inspectors in general, but they give you kind of a rudimentary template to start with. And unless you really start playing with it, you don't really know how much you can get out of that. And once you really start tweaking that report and getting the information and the data the way that you want it, where it kind of tells a story about the house, that's when you'll start to see, the good reviews and you'll start getting the referrals from agents and things like that. And it really is probably the best resume that you can get. And I know, Michael, you landed your first inspection with, one of those sample reports, through Spectora.
Yeah, that was a huge thing for me. I didn't think, I just that software is so powerful, and I think when you can show somebody what you're actually working with, I mean, it makes a huge difference. So yeah, like definitely the sample reports are huge. But gosh, as far as I hadn't spoken yet, great to have you on, my brother. Yeah, I feel like I know you. Just like we talked, Brad and I are, work now I'm in your shoes, filling in some big shoes, I feel like, and, we work so closely together, I've heard stories about you, so I'm really excited to get the opportunity to talk with you some today too, and
Good.
seeing somebody that's yeah, seeing somebody that's a few years ahead of me in this process, and I've got some questions I'm kinda curious to get your thoughts on and everything, I just might as well lead into it. How did you get into it? Because Brad, one thing I know about you that I'll let you speak to it, but I've heard a lot about your work ethic and how hard you work. How did it all start? I mean, you kind of talked about the Florida thing there, and I'm definitely interested in that too. I'm kind of curious that we're about an hour away from Florida, I guess, but I'm just kind of curious how you just got started in the whole industry and maybe it's a love for it or I don't know.
I was actually, I call it one of my past lives because I don't know if Brad's told you, I've done a I've got range. I've done a lot of different things. When I made the decision uh, that I wanted to see my name on the truck, so to speak, no matter what it was, and I made the decision that it was going to be home inspection. I was actually working a corporate job for a electronic medical software company. Um, I was a consultant for physician order entry. I basically travel around the country and make doctors put their orders in the computer, teach them how to log in, stuff like that. Um, and I had done several things in the trades before that, so I felt comfortable with things home related at that point. But honestly, the straw that broke the camel's back was just the corporate atmosphere was not jiving with where my life was going and the lifestyle I wanted to have. So I had just had enough. And while I was still employed with that company, I started the process. And not to take, not to misdirect any viewers away from Brad, but believe it or not, have you guys know who Inspector AJ is?
Yeah. Yeah.
So so this was right when or a little while after TikTok came out, and I'm scrolling through and I run across Inspector AJ. Watch a few of his videos, and I was ready to make the decision, and I was talking to my wife, and I just said, I can do this. I can for sure do what he's
Yeah.
doing. And that little bit of piqued interest turned into a huge rabbit hole. The next thing I know, I'm on Florida's website, on Alabama's website, figuring out what's got to be done, the hoops I'm going to have to jump through. uh, to get going. And, started with Internachi, did my online stuff. I don't know how much you know about Florida's regulations, but and the numbers of inspectors reflect this. But in Florida, it's a lot easier to get your license. You do your online stuff, you pass the national, you pay your money, and they give you a license. Because of that, there's a whole lot more inspectors in Florida than there are Alabama. In Alabama, you got to do all that, but you also got to prove that you can do this with the ride along program. Anyway, started down that path, and because of the ride along program, that's how I kind of hooked up with Brad. Realized that I got to do all this is just start picking up the phone, calling folks on the list, calling inspectors in the area. And I don't know if you experienced this, but at that time, a lot of the guys that I was talking to didn't want to help anybody out. Almost as if they were scared of potential competition or whatever it may be. And Brad was the complete opposite of that. He was very gracious and would, immediately open arms welcome me into a ride along. Uh, and I got to see a couple there, uh, right up close, just to make sure I wanted to do it. And then shortly after that, I let him know from the start, basically, that I want to own my own business. You know what I mean? There's two routes you can go here. You can own your own business, or you can do this part time. And we'll talk about the pros and cons and the ins and outs of that in a little bit. But even him knowing that, he never was like, all right, this is your one ride along. Now you go figure it out. No, he wanted me on for all 35. He wanted to make sure that if I was gonna get out there on my own, I halfway knew what I was doing. And of course that turned into me proving myself to him, and then him saying, all right, we're so busy, why don't here's a little work, why don't you help me out? So I'm sure you went through the same phases, those ride alongs. For me, at first, it was like, all right, how do I not make this guy mad? How do I show him that I'm somewhat valuable and I'm not making him stop to answer my questions constantly on what to do, what to put in. So that was my focus at first. And I got it pretty quick. Once I got familiar with the software and his template, I'm in ride alongs and I'm helping him do the stuff. Whether it's just simple checking the plugs and putting that stuff in, my focus was, how do I save him time? How do I save him heartache? Can I run interference with an agent and talk to them and get good at that, or talk to a homeowner? Um, and then that progressed to, all right, now I'm licensed in Alabama. I can actually work with him, for him, while I'm doing my own thing, while I'm getting my own thing up and running. And I would that turned into me doing them with him, uh, his stuff, and I would get one here and there as I was building my stuff. And the whole time I'm getting this exposure, seeing all this stuff, and meeting agents, meeting homeowners, listening to him talk and explain issues to homeowners and agents. That I feel like that's one of the biggest parts that a lot of guys overlook.
Just to kind of go back to something you were just talking about there, and I know you probably remember this, and I know Michael does. I tell everybody that does these ride-alongs with me. Now, Forrest was with me at a time where we had a handful of people come through. I tell all these guys because the ride-along aspect of it kind of carries the weight of, okay, I'm going to learn how to do an inspection with this guy. And, I tell everybody the same thing. We all know, if you're in the process of getting licensed, you know how to do the inspection, right? We've all taken the same types of courses, and, we've all done the same online stuff to get there. But I told Forrest and I told, all those other guys, and I know I still, tell Michael this sometimes, but the things that I wanted to show you guys was not like, this is how you check a door. This is how you check a window. It's no, this is what I did at first that cost me a lot of time. this is what I did at first that was an absolute failure. I used to do this and it was a complete waste of time. And, don't do this or the agents are going to hate you. Don't do this or your homeowners are going to want to hunt you down and beat you up. So it's the little things. It's kind of like the behind the scenes things or like the extracurricular things that I wanted to pass along to you guys. And then at the same time, you're already doing the inspection. So those things were the things that I wanted, to kind of pass along to help people the most because I don't know if I've talked about it in this particular podcast, but I know I've talked about it in social media and different stuff over the years. But when I got started, kind of going back to Forrest's point, nobody wanted to help me at all. I tell this story to all of you guys when you do these ride alongs. I remember this fella, I asked him a question about the summary in a report because the software that I was using at the time, I had the option to either put it at the beginning or at the end. And I'd gone to a meetup of sort, and I'm sitting at the same table with this guy, and I ask him, "Hey, just a quick question. Where do you put your summary? At the beginning of the report or at the end?" And this guy looked at me just straight faced and said, "Yeah, man, I'd love to be able to tell you that. All you have to do is pay for an inspection." And it was kind of, I mean, that's my, what is it, like an origin story for like a villain or something like this. But I knew then, I was like, okay, that guy had a point. He's not going to help me. I'm going to have to figure this out on my own. So I worked really hard at that stuff. And, that was the one thing that I wanted to make sure because, I mean, I was counting down the days. You had to be an inspector for 5 years. And the way that I got licensed, my anniversary is in August, right? So it's August 2nd. And the year that I would have been coming up to my 5 years, I asked one of the top people, in the state when it comes to the home inspection licensing. And I asked her, I said, how long do I have to wait? She said, if this is your 5th year, all you have to wait is for January 1. And I sent my stuff in January 2nd and made sure that I was on the website because I wanted to be able to help people in a way that nobody would help me. I mean, I know you talked about, me helping you. And Michael, you've said a lot of not really nice things, in regards to that as well. But I've also talked about too, this is a lonely profession. It can be, and it is. And, Forrest, I know you've done inspections for me whenever, I was just too busy to get to something or sick. I don't know if you remember, there was about a 4 month stretch there where I had a bone infection where I had to wear two different
Mhm.
size shoes on my feet. You were the one going up on the roof and climbing through attics and stuff. And, that would have been a really hard time for me had I not had somebody like you, to kind of lean on. And in a business where it sometimes can seem like every man for themselves, that was kind of the culture that I wanted to get away from. And I know, Michael, you and I have talked about that. And, you know, one a reason why I'm bringing this up right now is so Michael has a big one coming up on Tuesday. This is the biggest one that you've done on your own, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
you know, there is something. I mean, I know Forrest, you've done some, on your own before you got to me, but Michael's brought this up, and this is why I'm going around the world to get to this. But imposter syndrome, right? So we've all done it. I had it. I've told Michael, my imposter syndrome stories. And then, here he is going out on this big house, right? So if you can remember one, right, tell us about kind of what that's like from that perspective. Cause I can remember mine. I had a big house early on that I just felt like I'm never going to get out of this thing. Yes, this was a bad idea. People are going to see through this. They're going to think I'm terrible. This is taking way too long. But at the end of the day, you make it and you learn from it and it's fine and you move on. But I know Michael's is probably going to be Tuesday, but when was yours? Or tell us about that house.
Uh, the one that comes to mind, and this may not be exactly what you're asking for, but I had to call you in to help. So, you know,
Okay, I do remember that one.
traditionally, I'm the help when it comes to me and Brad. Like I've all, those first couple years, I've always been the one working for him. Well, uh, you know, towards the end of that period, right after I kind of I just wasn't able to work for him anymore because of my own schedule. I get one that was that originally was built by the McDonald's guy. You know who I'm talking about, Brad?
Gosh,
It was over there on the
I'm
river.
keep talking. I'm gonna look it up.
All right. So I get this call from these folks and they're going to buy this house. It's on the river. The roof line looks like an old McDonald's and everything. He had it architectured like that or drawn up like that. This thing was huge, absolutely huge. The Corps of Engineers wouldn't have let you build it on the river like that anymore. Half the foundation was overhanging the river. It had this big grotto like area in the middle of the home. It was huge. I think we had, I want to say, 8 or 9 HVACs, and I want to say in the 20s on the sub panels. I'm talking
Yeah, it
monstrous.
was. Um, I think it was 7 HVAC units, and then it was 22 electrical panels.
Yeah, yeah,
And the guy that had that built, his name was Harry Sonnenborn,
that's it.
and there's a movie. It's called The Founder. It's got Michael Keaton. Plays. He's not one of the Kroc brothers, but he's somebody with McDonald's. But Ryan from The Office.
Yes.
His name's escaping me now. But he played Harry Sonnenborn, and the story behind this guy is he was the basically kind of like the guy that originated the franchise model for fast food. So before he came along, you owned the franchise and it was your job to make sure that everything about that was successful. Well, when he came along, there's a scene in the movie where he tells Michael Keaton's character, "You're not in the restaurant business, you're in the real estate business." So that was the whole point. You owned the land and you owned the building, and it was up to the franchisee to run, the business out of it. But this house was a monster. Now, not to hijack your story, but I grew up down there and I lived on Foul River. So I water skied around this thing. I mean, this house, I've known it forever. And it did, like Forrest said, it had a grotto. It wasn't a lazy river, but it was kind of like that where it had a small wade pool that went half inside the house and half outside the house. It had a big indoor pool. It had a weight room. It had a steam room. It had a sauna. I mean, this thing, I mean, it was intimidating even for me. But I do remember that one just because I'll never forget that house just because I always wanted to go in it. But, yeah, the day that Forrest got that, which, goes to show what all I know, we underbid that job, you know, but
Way
Forrest is like, "How much?" He's like, "How much do you think?" And I'm like, "I don't know, Forrest. Let's just tell him this, and see if you get it." And, they did, they went with him and, Forrest came to me. I'll never forget this. And I was actually, uh, I'm only gonna tell this because you brought it up, but I was so glad that I was able to do this for you just because of all the help you had given me over the years. But Forrest comes to me and he's like, yeah, yeah, I got the job. And I said, man, that's good. Oh, Brad, it's such a big house. You know, I know you got your own stuff going on, but you think you could maybe take a day and like help me? And I said, yeah, yeah, absolutely, Forrest. And he said, and I mean, I know, you're usually the one that's this, that, and the other, but I told Forrest, I was like, nope. I said, the same deal that you've had with me, that's the same deal I want with you because if it was good enough for you, it's good enough for me. And we did that house. We got there at, like 8:30 in the morning. I know I had to actually bail out early that day, but we left there at dark. So, I mean, we probably had what do you think for us all total 18, 19 hours combined in that
yeah,
house?
every bit of it, every bit of it. And Brad said we underbid it, and we did. But we didn't know how many panels it had and HVACs it had. You know
No,
what I mean? Like, had it
no way
not
to
been for
know.
it probably would have been right on, but I would have split it with Brad for him bailing me out on that one. So I'll tell you how it all really went down. I don't know if Brad's told you the rules of improv yet, but it's always yes and. You always answer yes and. Never no but. It's always yes and. So this lady calls me and I sell it, man. I'm like, yeah, of course I can do it. Absolutely. Let me look at online and I'll give you a price. I hung up with her and I immediately text Brad. What do I charge for this thing, man? Brad, what do I charge for it? And we talk it out over text and we get a pretty good number. And then I get back to her with it and she's like, yeah, absolutely, sure. And then it starts to set in what I'd gotten myself into. And that's when I contact Brad and I'm like, all right, now you're going to have to help me with this because this thing's a monster. And we didn't even know what all was involved in it at that point. God, I hope she don't see this because it's really cards on the table right right now. But no, we did it. We hit it out of the park. We didn't miss a beat. We caught things that I think nobody else would have caught, and just the sheer scale and mass of this thing. Uh, I don't think another two inspector team in the tri-state area probably could have done what we did that day. We really, Brad really bailed me out that day, early in my trajectory.
Well, you brought up like the scale of it. I mean, like I said, I've known that house since I was a kid. And to this day, I don't think I've inspected anything. I mean, I inspected that house, wasn't that big. What was it, like 7,000 square feet, give or take?
Yeah, something like that.
And I inspected a 10,000 square foot house one day that, you know, 4 or 5 air conditioners, but I'm basing whenever we're looking at the square footage, that's what I'm basing it on. But if you would have told me that it had 20 some odd electrical panels, I just remember it was like, gosh, it was almost lunchtime. Forrest got started. I was working on the exterior and Forrest got started on the electrical panels. And we kind of cross up at some point in the house. And I'm like, how's things going with you? And it's like 11 o'clock. And he's like, I'm still working on electrical panels. No, it was air conditioners.
HVAC.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I said, well, let's just keep plugging away on it. But I mean, even for me, I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself. But, that kind of goes back to, saying this was a lonely profession because when you don't have a network of guys, I mean, Forrest and I had worked together 2 years at that point. So, I mean, it was like right and left hand. We were both doing the same thing. We knew what the other one was doing. But, if you don't have people like that to pull from and you get into a situation where you have to do something like this, that's when you run into a situation where, could a single inspector do that house? Absolutely. But how well of a job are you going to be able to say that you did at the end of it? So, because he was able to focus on the things that, he was focusing on, and I was able to focus on the other things, at the end of the day, when that report came together, I mean, it was one hell of a report. But that leads me to this. So, Michael, on Tuesday, I can't help you. You're on your own. You're going to be doing this by yourself. You know, because you were in the same boat, you had sent me a message. You're like, yeah, these people want me to do this house. Take a look at it. Just tell me what you think. And up until this point, biggest thing you've probably done is probably, 2,500 or 3,000 square feet. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, yeah, right at 6,000 square feet, I would just do it for this. And he tells me later at the afternoon inspection, he's like, they said yes, and I'm like, "Congratulations, buddy," but I could see it on his face. He's already thinking like, you know,
Yeah.
"Yeah, what
It's
have
a
I got myself
bittersweet
into?"
thing. Yeah, it's a bittersweet I wanted the inspection, I want it, but also a little bit nervous, man, so this is kinda like both of y'all, far as you've been initiated through all this process and working with Brad, and, man, some of these big houses, it's like an initiation, man. Going through this and getting this one under your belt and just I mean, you don't forget these things, do you?
No, no, you don't. But once you get through it, man, the next one, it's like it's not a big deal. Like we did such a good job on that that house. That was my first interaction with that client. I've done another huge house for her. I did a huge house for her daughter, and I've done two major commercial inspections for her. So we hit it out of the park, and she's trusted me that much on all that other stuff since then. That's why I hope she don't see this, because my cover will be blown. But there is that, it's like that meme of you lied on your resume and said you could do Excel really well, and now you're trying to fill out an Excel spreadsheet. It's that bullet sweat syndrome. But if you've been hanging out with Brad, you'll be fine. You'll be a little intimidated, and you're gonna get out of order at first, but just refocus and get back to your template. Do one thing at a time. Don't step over yourself, and you'll get through it. And when you're done, you'll have another level of confidence that will be able to get you through the next one and the next one and the next one. It's just part of the process, man.
Yeah, I think that's right, man. It's about building confidence and just staying steady, and that's kind of what I've been coaching myself. I've been texting Brad some lately, just kind of he's been a good pep talk guy for me too, man. So, it's like this how grateful I am for like Brad, you kind of mentioned it, this like fellowship, and I hope I can kind of develop this with you too, Forrest. It's just, man, when you need to call somebody about something you haven't seen before, or maybe you need somebody to bail you out of a big inspection or whatever. I mean, how important is that? And it's so funny, kind of even going all the way back to this ride along thing that you have such a this contention um, from you know from other inspectors, right? That don't really want to help you out. And man, how important it is for us to help each other out and through this process. Because I think and I not to speak it, negatively on the Florida thing about well, maybe I am, I don't think. But I'm just wondering if the mentorship is such an interesting thing, this, like, ride-along program is a really helpful thing, and I mean, it doesn't really have to be ride-along, you can do this in Florida too, so but the mentorship, like, how important it is, 'cause, I mean, I just realized talking with you guys and working with Brad, like, it's not about how much I know, it's about how much I don't know. I think I know a lot sometimes, but man, it's really about, gosh, I've still got a lot to learn, and it's really making me better, and I'm really, accelerated, on an accelerated path of learning this stuff because of the mentorship, so I'm really grateful for that, but it definitely makes you think, it's like, "Man, I got a long way to go," but I'm probably miles ahead of a lot of people that never had that opportunity. So yeah, I'm grateful to be, I think I'm kind of being initiated in this process right now too, man. And it's really good to hear some of these stories. I got another question for you, Forrest, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were the secrets you think, like, kinda getting started? Because right now I'm kinda doing a little help Brad as much as I can, as much as he's willing to let me help him, and then taking some inspections as I get them. So, hopefully that this will start balancing itself out, and Brad, so grateful for you to be supporting us to knowing that we're opening our own businesses and that you're helping us out to get that started, man. So, yeah, but going back to the question, like, what were the secrets you think, or what were really successful for you to try to kind of get out on your own and really start landing those good jobs?
Well, I mean, I may be the wrong one to ask this because I feel like a lot of my growth was just slow and organic. A lot of it was repeat business, and in the beginning, we were real heavy on the social media. Tried to post on Facebook just to stay relevant. Maybe one, maybe two times a week. Just enough to not be an irritation to people's feed where they would unfollow. Um, trying to build a following on Facebook. But the further along I got, it was like I don't feel like I really see a whole lot of return on that, and my growth has picked up. Um, so like Brad said, when I started with him, it was the hot time for the market, and right when uh we had to kind of part ways, it had slowed down a good bit. But like Brad said, I had, you figure out a number that you need. So I needed probably 3 to 4 a week to make ends meet. And there was a time, probably that first 6 months, where we had split up, where it wasn't quite that. So, I had there's two ways to go about this. You can either do it part-time and work for somebody, or you can own your own business. You can't own your own business part-time. If you're going to
Mm.
own your own business, you got to be available all the time. So, in order to get extra income during that little 6 month interim period there, I had to take something where I could still make money, but also be available if an agent called me and needed me, on a quick close for tomorrow, or needed me to do something on the weekend. I did a lot of weekends back in when I started out. So I actually delivered for DoorDash, that first 6 months, 8 months, something like that, just for a little extra, just to make sure I made it all the way to the end of the month. To be honest with you, I never really was heavy on the advertising. I think the relationships that I built with clients and with agents grew and grew and grew. And I'll tell you, man, every month since I've started this thing has been better. Every month I've had more stuff, and you may only see small gains right now, but celebrate those small gains, because it'll snowball. And if you watch, every month will get better. Brad always preached to me that, you know, we all can do inspections, we all can produce a report, but the most important tool that we have, or the asset that we have, is our time. And I'm not talking like a uh, time is worth more than money type thing. I'm talking about the time you spend explaining things, the time you spend with a client, a homeowner, an agent, where you would rather be in the truck headed home, but you got to do a little bit of hand holding. That's what builds the relationships, where they start to count on you as their go-to person. And when they have questions that they need answered to make them look smart, they come to you. And that snowballs into a uh, you're their go-to guy type thing. So that kind of goes back to, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about marketing, so to speak, because I didn't do a whole lot of it. I just kind of put the rubber to the road and tried to build the best relationships I could. A lot of listening to Brad talk to people is what made me good in that respect of the game.
I love that about the time thing. Yeah, I appreciate that. No, that's great input. Thank you for us.
When it comes to, building these relationships, I know Forrest did this. I'm not going to tell Forrest's story, but this is why I'm bringing this up. So Michael he had kind of built a relationship with an agent early on, and he done all the right stuff, introduced himself, told him, or told the agent, hey, I'm a home inspector in the area. I'm sure you have somebody, but if you ever need a guy, I'd love to have the opportunity. And, Michael did something that Forrest did. And I told Michael this, but Michael says, after a couple months, he's like, I think I'm gonna give up on this person because, like, I don't want to annoy him, but it's clear that they're not gonna send me any work. And then lo and behold, he gets a inspection from him, like, not even a week later. But Forrest, I don't know if you remember, early on, there was a few agents, you had kind of picked out. And I'll let you tell it, but yeah, Forrest was livid because he had I think you had told me that's the last tomatoes I'll ever take to that office. And then lo and behold, like a week later, he gets a job and it's like, I told you, Forrest. But, you know, my point to telling this whole story is you're going to make these relationships with people, and when you do that, right? Obviously, we want to work tomorrow. But, for a real estate agent, they might go a month or so before they have a job for you, or the client's already picked their own inspector. But never give up on some of these relationships. But yeah, Forrest, tell the story about you and this agent, because I'll tell you that is something like I remember, a lot from our time that we worked together, but that is one of the most frustrated that I ever saw you get. And then when it came around to where that person did want to use you, you were like, well, maybe they were just busy.
And that's pretty much exactly how it happened. And what to take away from that is like keep investing in folks and it'll pay off. Like y- and I'm the worst at this. I should be listening to my own advice, but you know, they'll come around. They'll come around and they'll need you. They haven't forgot about you. So keep your nose to the grindstone as far as communicating with those agents. And when one comes up and they need something, they'll let you know. Uh, if they need you on a weekend, if they've got one that's a rush close or something like that, be available. And then when they have to use you and can't get somebody else, you hit it out of the park, and then you're their guy. But I've been there. I've invested in folks and not got anything for a month or two, and just been sour on the whole deal, and said to myself, said to Brad, well, I'm just not communicating with them anymore. And then the phone will ring and it'll be them. I got to have somebody. It turns out that you end up building relationships with those folks, and then everyone they get, they send to you.
Oh, that's cool. That's good. That's great input. The availability, that's definitely something I can offer, I think what can, the whole time thing, man, I'm just really taking that with me tonight. I think that's great. It's just to be able to spend the time thinking about how this is such I mean, with the clients, like, this is such a huge investment, and, I mean, maybe some sort of subject about air conditioners or whatever it is that they're unaware of and don't really understand the situation, so just taking the time to explain to that and bring some calmness to them so they really understand what's going on, I'm sure that goes miles with them, so I appreciate y'all sharing that.
What you want to get good at is, and I say this because I know you're coming out of the same school that I graduated from, and that's the Brad University. Um, what you want to get good at is talking folks off the ledge. Because if you do this the way he taught you how to do it and you do it right, you're gonna come close to killing some deals. It's just
Oh
inevitable.
yeah.
It's inevitable. So my spiel goes like this because my time has become limited and I need to be where I can talk to folks on the phone after they've seen the report rather than waste a million hours with them on the front end explaining stuff that they haven't even seen yet. So my spiel goes to a client. You'll get a report same day. It'll be a lot of stuff, lots of pictures, lots of defects, lots of details. Do not get overwhelmed. Take your time, sit down and review it with your wife or your husband, make some notes. And when you guys are ready, you call me. It's important that you call me so I can go over the summary, answer any questions you have, talk about what might be wrong and what type of contractor needs to fix it or do whatever.
Mhm.
And I really stress that they make that call because I try to be like me and Brad joked around. We try to be Michael Jordan on these, and we don't miss. We do our best anyway. And these comments in the report, they read very formal sometimes. So when folks get these reports that don't know a whole lot about houses and they see 70 defects with lots of pictures, it's easy to get overwhelmed. So if they can remember to call me and let me talk them back off the ledge or explain things in a manner where everything's fixable. Now you're at a point to where you need to know how much it's going to cost you to fix it. So your next step is get in touch with this contractor, find out what it's going to cost to get a vapor barrier in this crawl space or fix this pier or what the situation is on the roof. I know it sounds like the end of the world in the report, but here's the process forward, or it's just not something, you know what I mean? Sometimes they find out that it's not something that's worth pursuing when the numbers don't match up. It's just too much to do, and then they need to look at the next one. And because you helped them not make a good decision or not make a bad one, so to speak, they're going to use you on that next one. So that phone call after the fact is like the most important thing that you can do. Be available for that phone call, stress that they call you, be ready to either talk them off the ledge, explain things, or help them move through to the next thing if it's just too dire of a situation to make sense financially.
I like the fact that you kinda integrated the follow-up phone call into the process. I think that's a great idea.
When Forrest was starting to get, 4 or 5 inspections a week, he was always working Saturdays. And whenever he started to build his business to the point to where, I mean, he just didn't need me anymore. And, we were talking about it at work, and I'm, obviously was happy for him and, talking about his successes and the way things were going. And then one day he came to work and said something that was just awful. It was awful because it takes a lot to make me sad, right? Old Yeller, Dale Sr., that kind of stuff. But Forrest came to work one day and, he's kind of leading me into, Brad, our time's coming to an end, and I was really happy for him, of course, but he said something that his wife said that just gutted me. He said, Amber told me just the other night to enjoy the time that we have because one day I'm going to be so busy that we're not going to get to hang out at work anymore.
What do they say? One day you riding around the streets on your bikes with your friends, and it was the last time you'd ever do it, and nobody ever knew it. That relates
Yeah.
exactly to
Yeah.
what he just said. Like, enjoy the journey rather than focusing on the destination. The destination's coming, and when you get to a point where money's not tight, you're just going to find a way to spend more money. So enjoy the journey, for sure. Just recently, Brad, I hit I think 200 review. I think I'm at like 202 reviews on Google.
Nice.
And Brad's the
Yeah.
one that pushed me to start soliciting for reviews, and it's a great accomplishment. And when it happened, I was like, yes, and told my wife and look at it and everything. Inevitably, I jump over to Brad's and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm still that far. But I always will be that far from his reviews. But I still, even today, I hold myself to, I don't look at anybody else or any other inspectors. I look at where Brad is and where I am and the distance there and the relation. I still hold myself to that standard because as long as I do that, as long as you shoot for perfection, even if you fall short, which you're inevitably going to fall short of perfection, you're going to be a whole lot closer to that perfection than you would if you didn't shoot for it. So keep your standards high.
I did see the other day where you were getting close to 200 reviews because I sent your number to somebody for a roof evaluation, right? So whenever I looked you up on Google, you had like 198.
Yeah.
And whenever I saw that, I thought to myself, I was like, dang, one, I can remember when you had, two, when you had 20. And you were kind of like, golly, man. And I'm like, it's just everybody starts at zero first. You just have to keep plugging away. But to get to 200 reviews, I mean, I don't know what your actual conversion rate is, but to anybody that doesn't, I mean, you think, oh, well, you do 200 inspections, that's 200 reviews. If only it were that easy.
Yeah.
But to do 200 to get like 200 reviews, that's easily 1,000 inspections, so you're probably closing in on 1,000 if you're not already there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Every bit of it.
I mean, that is something that I mean, that's an achievement. That's really I knew when I saw 198, I was like, "Oh, look at him over there. Look at he just breathing down my neck."
all my reviews are 5-star, and a lot of them aren't just stars, they're glowing reviews that folks wrote. But I can't tell you how many times I've had a client or potential client call me and say, I saw your website or I looked you up on Google and I saw your reviews, so I wanted to reach out and get a quote or whatever. And once I get them on the phone, I usually close the deal, you know. But start with those reviews, man. That's a big thing as far as marketing and getting traction on your business. But I do have a formal
Mhm.
request. I feel like you guys are missing the boat by not having a what grinds my gears segment. Like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
what grinds my gears
We
is
like the feedback.
yeah, is agents saying the phrase pencil me in. Can you pencil me in? No,
What does that even mean?
you get your contract signed and get your ducks in a row and then call me and then we'll schedule the inspection. I don't even own a pencil. You know, something like that. Or
That's that is that is classic Forrest. I've always told Michael this. I said, Forrest is like he's very no nonsense when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? Um, when you're trying to do something with Forrest, you can't be wishy washy. It either has to be this or that. But yeah, Forrest does not live in that whimsical place in between where it's like, hey, maybe we do this on this day. You either schedule it or you don't. You either use it or you lose it.
yeah, good
Well,
stuff.
yeah, guys, this has been fun. Forrest, we'll definitely get you back on. As a matter of fact, like we might just do a thing where when we do the grind my gears, that's the Forrest episode. That's actually what we probably call it. We'll just call it the grind my gears episode with Forrest Simpson. But gosh, the time flew on this one, and I had a good time. This was probably the most fun I've had on these. But, yeah, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Um, Michael, I know you got your big thing on Tuesday, but you're with me tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
You're stuck with me for one day at least before you
Uh,
do your other thing. And then,
Glad to be with you, man. And it was great to talk with you today, Forrest, man. What an honor. Get to get to meet you in person and all your wisdom you're willing to share. So thank you, man.
well, Forrest, tell everybody where they can find you at and tell them the name of your business and stuff so they can look you up.
All right. So Forrest Simpson, FCS Home Inspection. You can give me a call at 251-978-9260. We're on Facebook. We have look our website up. We'd be glad to help you out.
Michael, tell everybody where they can find you at, buddy.
Gulf Star Inspections, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Come find me. I'll be here.
And you can find me everywhere at Due South Brad. Guys, we've reached the conclusion of this. You know what my friend Chad would say, don't you, Michael?
What's that?
Everybody's the best.
Everybody's the best.